is it okay to rent forever and build wealth doing that? Well, that's something I'm trying to do myself. And I felt like I found a video that by Dave Ramsey and his co-host daughter Rachel that would be a good compare and contrast against those two opinions. This is not a critique of their content. It's more of a commentary and just showing how potentially you could rent forever and build wealth doing that. So let's get into the video and let's see what we come up with.
Brought to you by the EveryDollar app. Start budgeting for free today.
Jenny says, I'm a single woman and I rent an apartment in a great city. I'm very happy here as it is close to my work, my church, and most of my social activities. I have no desire to own my own home because I'm afraid I have to have maintenance and lawn care people on speed dial. And to buy something even remotely affordable, I would have to move way outside of town. Is it okay to rent forever? I hear you talk about a paid off home being a large piece of people's net worth, but is it still possible to build wealth if you don't own a home?
So for Jenny out there, especially if you for some reason watch this video, I can completely relate to your situation. As far as now, I'm married with 3 kids, but as far as the living in an expensive area, especially where I come from, which is from Vancouver, Canada, it's always been in the top 3 most expensive places in the world to live. And because it's one of the most expensive places in the world to live, especially these days, it really has led to a lot of what I'm finding in my age group, and certainly younger, I'm 34 by the way, disenchantment with just owning property. And, that has some pretty negative knock-on effects, right? People get lazy when they when they don't have that belief that they can, kind of rise to the occasion. So, that's a problem. And then the other knock-on effect is, right, the confidence that you can have a family and, raise the next generation. And maybe that's something you've always wanted, but now, you're feeling cash strapped and that's just not really a thing. So it's similar, but maybe not in that regard, but I do definitely understand the need for it. So anyways, let's keep moving on.
I think the biggest piece in this, Jenny, is looking far in the future. And I always look to when it comes to retirement time, the singular expense that continues to go up that you will not have control over is your house, is your housing. So rent will continue to rise. And if you own your home and you pay it off, then that's an expense that you don't have, and it's continuing to work for you, building equity. So it is a part of your financial picture that I would want you to have a part of it. It doesn't have to be today. It doesn't even have to be in the next 5 years, but eventually I would have home ownership in your financial picture for many reasons. But I think mostly when you look towards times like retirement, you won't have to have that expense that continues to rise and you actually have an asset.
So the big idea from this segment, Rachel's talking about retirement, which is obviously that shouldn't be ignored no matter what age you're at. Now, the one thing with trying to answer the question, is it okay to rent forever? On the flip side, if you own your home, the obvious ideal situation is that you pay off your home before retirement. So you can axe that most expensive piece of your budget, which is your shelter cost. So for us, what we're going to need if we are going to rent long term, because we can't just pay off rent and just live in whatever someone else's property for free, we need a cash flow mechanism that can allow for that generation of income to cover your rental costs. Now, is there something out there that can provide for it? Well, we're going to get to that. So let's keep going.
Yeah.
For you.
I can completely endorse that where you are today in your life, Jenny, that this particular situation makes sense. It sounds like you got it made right now. There's nothing wrong with that at all. It just doesn't scale long term. So here's the problem. She doesn't say how old she is. Let's just say she's 30, okay? Every single year from 30 to 70, your rent's going to go up. Or your landlord's asleep at the wheel. they will die and the next person will jack it through the roof to make up the difference. But the value of the rent goes up every single year from age 30 to age 70. Your most expensive line item in your budget is housing. So the most expensive line item in your budget is out of your control, variable, and increasing. That is not scalable. That's not sustainable long term. Again, what Rachel said, if you want to do it for 4 or 5 years, I think you got a good gig. Go ahead and do it for 4 or 5 years. But let's not translate that to, is it okay to rent forever? Well, it's okay, but it's going to kill you. Because what you're paying in rent now is nothing compared to what it'll be 40 years from now. I think we can all agree with that. And so when you buy, if you buy on a fixed rate 15-year, you now have a fixed payment for a property. It doesn't have to have a lawn. It can be a condo. You have a fixed rate. And then when you get paid off, you have a fixed rate, which is zero, other than your taxes and your property insurance, right? Those are two things that will go up as well, but they're a much smaller percentage, and they don't end up being the largest thing in your budget anymore, usually.
Okay, so in this part, Dave, the big idea here is really how to scale it, right? His concern with renting forever is, right, rent costs keep going up. Once you've paid off your home, well, that scaling issue doesn't exist. The only thing that, will probably increase a little by little over time, but it's a much smaller percentage of things like your property taxes, maybe your utilities, but those are much smaller compared to, your actual mortgage cost. So the three big ideas here are, we need, especially for retirement, we got to address that, right? If we're gonna, which pathway, that fork in the road do we got to take? If we're gonna go home ownership, how do we pay it off by, typically 65 or whatever the plan is, pay it off before you exit the workforce. Two, big idea was a cash flow mechanism. If we're gonna rent forever, we're taking the other pathway. Then what cash flow mechanism can we use to offset those rental costs? And then the third big idea here that Dave was, obviously concerned about was, how do we scale that if we're going to be renting forever? How does that cash flow mechanism scale over time? It's got to be able to grow, ideally, naturally, if it can, to keep up with those rents. And I know that changes depending on where you live. I totally understand that. All right, so those three big ideas. And we'll listen to this last little bit here, which is very important.
And I will say this too, Jenny, that it doesn't have to be a single family home. If you are single, you don't need a lot of room. It could be a condo, right? But owning property that you eventually own full out is what the key is.
So right there, Rachel, I think, even though it's probably one of the simpler kind of big ideas out there, is you must own something. Right now, she says own property, but I'm just saying own something. It could be a house. It could be the cash flow mechanism. But the idea of ownership in property or ownership in, like company shares of some kind, right? Whether it be in the stock market, but owning something that can build wealth over time is really key here. And especially for ordinary people out there, it's in so many ways these days. It's so like the access to a lot of these strategies are so much easier, and especially here on YouTube, people who are willing to talk about these ideas are so plentiful. You get free information. It's truly a remarkable time to be alive. To have the kind of access to information that we do. I would say probably at this point, we don't really need to go much farther. We don't need to watch the full clip, right? We understand that if you're going to rent long term, you need a cash flow mechanism. You need that, right? It needs to be able to scale, and whatever it is, you got to own it. There is no shortcut in there where you don't own something, right? Unless you win the lottery, and then I guess then you don't need the cash flow mechanism. Okay, so this is something that my channel and speaks to very much so, right? So my channel's number one goal is talking about this cash flow mechanism that we call income investing, or cover call ETFs, which is a strategy usually for people who are retired or near retirement. That it's a place where you can invest in funds that hold a basket of stocks, sometimes 20 stocks, sometimes 100 stocks, sometimes 500 stocks. And they are able to juice up the dividends basically every month. Or in this case with ETFs, the language is usually, is distributions, okay, in the 10 to 12% range. That's something I personally speak to, and that's how I invest. 100% in funds that generate 10 to 12% yields. And really the mission here is to do it ideally sustainably, that it can grow a little bit over time, and that can naturally beat out in things like inflation, things like your rental increases ideally. So let's actually take a walk through a little bit of this channel, just to, especially for newer people who maybe aren't familiar with this style of investing, and can this actually work? Now, my number one goal for the channel and the people watching is for you all to become more independent income investors if you are looking to offset costs in your life. And maybe your goal isn't necessarily, a bigger stock portfolio. It is just simply like, I just want a better quality of life, but getting there with maybe less, a smaller portfolio size. Videos like my portfolio reviews are really good for that, because you can see exactly what I'm invested into. You get a little bit of the philosophy around what it is I'm trying to do. The other big kind of key idea, especially in the community tab here, is, I post my portfolio and its performance all the time. So you actually have that clarity, and there's that trust between us. That I'm not trying to pull the wool up over your eyes in any way, shape, or form. You can see that in week 34, this is what the portfolio size was. This is my year-to-date performance, total return, which takes the price appreciation of everything I own plus the distributions together. So that is what total return means. And you can see my portfolio, which to my surprise this year is beating out the tech-heavy NASDAQ and the S&P 500, two very well-known indexes, and they're typically the best performing against other indexes. You got the Canadian TSX and the Dow Jones Industrial kind of down here at the basement. But over time, right, you can also you can see how I did in the weekly post 33, and you can keep going through the community tab, and there's some other good stuff in there as well. And then every month I also post an income report post of how my dividends have been growing every single month, which September of last year was just under $1,500. There's been almost there's been a 25% increase since then. I don't need to live off of this stuff, but by next year I am planning on exiting home ownership, and I will be renting. So part of the portfolio is gonna need to offset that rental costs. And why does it need to offset that rental cost? Mainly because in my target neighborhood that I do not want to leave. Right, I don't want to move away like Jenny was suggesting in her question. I'm perfectly happy with where I am. I've lived in Vancouver, suburbs of Vancouver, my whole life. I don't want to go anywhere. So I want to really make this work in this very insanely expensive city. How can we make this work? So anyway, the point is, this is the cheapest house in my target neighborhood, $1.349 million. What kind of mortgage is that? $6,000. It's nuts. Okay, let's look at the cheapest townhouse. Right? Okay, beautiful. There's no other pictures to look at. Or actually there are. Right? It's pretty nice. Move-in ready. Don't have to do any other kind of work on it. $5,100 a month. Whereas if we rent, here's the thing. The barrier of entry is a lot lower, right? So I can get into, instead of paying $6,000, I can save up that down payment if I was to, put that to work in these CoveredCall ETFs that generate that 10 to 12% yield. And we could put it to work actually offsetting these kinds of costs. Now, maybe you don't have a family. Well, I mean, I'm sure there's condos out there that cost a lot less than this, but the point is, the barrier of entry is a lot smaller, especially if I want a house. I think my upper limit is probably somewhere in here, like maybe about 4,200. So by the time I go to sell my house and port that equity into the CoveredCall ETFs, the high yield funds, that amount will be able to offset the cost, or partially offset the cost to get into one of these homes. I'm not going to bog you guys down with the math, but basically, will my costs overall increase? Actually, no, they won't. They'll actually be the exact same. And while that's at work, I'll still be able to have another account with over $100,000 in it, just still reinvesting. I'll have maxed it out. I won't be able to contribute much more unless like every year turns over, right? Because that's my TFSA. For Americans who aren't familiar with what a TFSA is, it's kind of like a Roth IRA, except there is no age limit. I can take money out whenever, at whatever age. But whatever you take out, you can't put that money back in until the following year, right? So its contribution room resets every single year, and then plus you get a bit of a top up. Usually, this past year it was like $7,000. So at my age, I'm probably one of the youngest people to have like the full, like since the inception of this TFSA, I think it must be over 100 grand now of contribution room. So, and I think I'm probably I got maybe $13,000 left of contribution space left to go, and then yeah, that's it for me. Something like that. I want to say $13,000 or $14,000 left. Anyways, hopefully you all enjoyed that commentary on, can you rent forever? I mean, renting offers flexibility. It offers you the ability just to kind of go where you want. Ease of getting into it. Barrier of entry is a lot lower. You don't necessarily have to commit to an area, right? Whereas you buy into an area, there's a chance you might not be able to sell. Whereas with renting, you can up and move whenever you want. Disaster strikes, destroys the home, you just move on, and your investments, your cash flow mechanism move with you. So hopefully you all enjoyed that, and keep building wealth. And if you decide to do it through CoveredCall ETFs, and check out the channel, hit all the buttons of like and subscribe variety, and I'll see you all in the next video.